Hi, I'm Christopher Ray, and welcome to the second of 3 video lectures about Qian Zhongshu's novel Fortress Besieged. I encourage you to read the novel before you watch this video, and I also suggest that you check out the brief video lecture that I made about Qian Zhongshu's life and works. In this video, I want to focus on travel, and travel in one particular segment of the novel, Chapter 5. This is a novel that explores what travel, movement, and entrapment have to do with the human condition. And Chapter 5, I think, is unique. It's a kind of standalone segment of the novel in which Fang Hongjian and several companions travel in the interior of China, leaving some things behind, pursuing other things. Where does this journey take them? And why is this journey here? Their travel is in a particular place in time. They are traveling during war, and they are traveling to the home front, the hinterland, away from the battlefront, and also away from the coastal city of Shanghai, which was, in the novel, under Japanese occupation. They have a lot of adventures and misadventures along the way, and so one of the things I want to talk about is, well, what kind of meanings can we extrapolate from these different encounters that they have? First, I want to talk about the historical reality of refugees and how it relates to some of the themes of the novel. What did it mean to be a refugee? What was going on militarily in China? And I think Chapter 5, some of the thematics that we see actually relate to the novel as a whole. So I think that we could consider this to be a very picaresque mode of representation. So I want to define the picaresque mode and how we might use it as a tool for literary analysis. Qian Zhongshu does something that he's kind of done before, and that he does a typology of different types of characters. Some are like humans, some are like beasts. At the end of Chapter 5 in particular, there's a reference to a very ghostly ambiance. And it begs a question for me about why would Qian Zhongshu take us on this long journey and end us near a graveyard. Before we turn to Chapter 5, let's start with the very first page of the novel, which begins with a journey of a very different type. We're on a boat. It was toward the end of July, the hottest days of the year. In China, the heat was even more oppressive than usual. Later, everyone agreed the unusual heat was a portent of troops and arms, for it was 1937. The French liner, the Vicomte de Bragelonne, was on its way to China. The timing would be familiar to anyone who was reading this novel in 1947, because July 1937 was the month in which full-scale war broke out between China and Japan after a military skirmish in Beijing. So this is where everything starts going to hell. Secondly, I think the setting is very interesting, in that we're on a boat, we're on a journey, we're on a very fluid surface. We are then brought on deck where we meet all of these passengers from various backgrounds and social classes. We have French people, young men who are being sent to be policemen in the colonies like Vietnam or in the French concession in Shanghai. We have Chinese people of different backgrounds. We have foreign returned students. We have people of dubious backgrounds. But there's also a literary allusion hiding in plain sight in the opening page of this novel, in the very title of the boat itself, which alludes to a romance novel by one of the great 19th century romance novelists, Alexandre Dumas, who wrote The Three Musketeers. And Vicomte de Bragelonne was one of the sequels to that best-selling serialized picaresque adventure novel of the swashbuckling hero D'Artagnan and his companions. And this is very interesting because Qian Zhongshu is inserting this illusion that suggests maybe we're on a bit of a romantic adventure ourselves. So how will this adventure turn out? And do we have a D'Artagnan figure? Well, this was an age when China really did need heroes. However, the early years of the war did not go well for China, and the nationalist government fled upriver in what was called the Great Pullback. So the capital had been at Nanjing, right on the Yangtze River, but the military and the civilian personnel all went upriver, and a temporary wartime capital was established in Chongqing. So this was a massive undertaking involving hundreds of thousands, even millions of people. It was very slow, logistically challenging, and the nationalists even destroyed levees in order to flood big parts of China so that the Japanese could not pursue them. And this caused widespread havoc and death among the people, but it did succeed in halting some of the Japanese pursuit. And we have representations of this new wartime culture emerging in places like Chongqing, where the Japanese would do air raids and bomb the city, and you would have buildings destroyed, but then soon rebuilt. One important thing to know about the broader context of refugees in wartime China is that most refugees actually did not go that far. They did not travel thousands of miles. Some did, but most people stayed in their local area. They would hear that an attack was imminent, they would flee their homes and go to the nearest safe space that they could. And then once they heard rumors or news that the attack was over, they would go back home. And so we have some characters who do this in the novel. This type of refugee, however, is entirely different from the type of refugee that Fang Hongjian might represent. He does travel. He's trying to advance his career. He's also, however, trying to escape not the Japanese attack, but a love affair gone bad. And this large-scale human drama attracted the attention of artists, who made many representations of the sufferings and the realities of people on the road. It wasn't just artists who took to the road, their artwork did as well. And so you would have, for example, cartoonists doing roving exhibitions of their works, either representing the latest news or encouraging people to redouble their efforts and resistance. What I want to highlight, however, is that a lot of the travel in Fortress Besieged is not a human tragedy. It's more of a comedy, or maybe a tragic comedy, in which a lot of funny things happen, a lot of ridiculous and absurd things happen as well. And so what is going on here? Let's start with Fang Hongjian, our protagonist. He is from a village. His father is the local gentry. He was once engaged to be married to a young woman who died, and the father from the rich family that owns a bank bankrolls his erstwhile son-in-law to go study abroad. He does not earn a degree, he just fools around, and in desperation he buys a fake diploma from an Irishman in the US. He later returns to Shanghai and gets embroiled in all of these love affairs. He loves one woman, another woman loves him. Neither of them turn out well. After things go bad in Shanghai, Fang Hongjian heads to the interior, but why he goes to the interior is quite interesting. Zhao Xinmei, another young man, thinks that Fang Hongjian loves the woman that he does, but actually he's wrong. And he engineers this invitation to come from Sanlu University to recruit Fang Hongjian away and remove the competition in this love triangle. But things end up not working out well for either of them, and they become allies of a sort in this journey in chapter 5. Another traveling companion is this young woman who is also a teacher and who later becomes Fang Hongjian's wife. At the beginning of this journey into the interior, they're on a boat, and Fang Hongjian has this moment of revelation, which he confesses to Xinmei about the perpetual dissatisfaction of his life, where he keeps going different places, realizing that he shouldn't have taken that journey, that he should turn back and make amends, but that he doesn't have the guts to do it. So it's this moment of self-insight in which he notices that he kind of lacks the moral fortitude to do what he knows is right. Fang Hongjian is our main person. Zhao Xinmei becomes this confidant, and so they actually become closer and closer and better friends over the course of this journey. And then there are these characters who seem like secondary characters, and Li Meiting is a fantastic antagonist. Gu Erqian is somewhat secondary in terms of narrative weight, and Sun Roujia is someone who seems very inconspicuous at first, but becomes very important later on. And there's a particular moment of an encounter that she and Fang Hongjian have when they are crossing a stream. And even though it looks to the onlookers like he's helping her across the river, she is actually helping him to steady his nerves. Yang Jiang wrote an essay about Qian Zhongshu and the novel Fortress Besieged in the 1980s. And in that she provides many revelations, some specifically about chapter 5, like this example about Li Meiting and the widow that he encounters. Yang Jiang says that that was inspired by real life. The narrative follows a single character or character type known as a Picaro, who is a knave or someone with kind of flexible morals, shall we say. Sometimes they're actually evil, but most of the times they may have some estimable qualities. They're survivors, and they have a lot of experiences during the travel. So definitely the journey is more important than destination, you could say. And Picaresque narratives are structured in terms of episodes. One thing happens, another thing happens, and there's some connective tissue between them. Sometimes it's architectonic and very well planned out. Other times, like with serial fiction, you may have just one thing, then another thing. And you may also have within these narratives set-piece descriptions of people or places or scenery. The tone tends to be comedic or satirical. So the picaro or knave is often used as a device to do social critique. In Chinese, picaresque narratives are often termed 流浪汉小说, the 流浪汉 being the picaro, or 游记. Many travelogues or travel narratives are also very picaresque in nature. So who is the picaro here? Well, in Fortress Besieged, it would clearly be Fang Hongjian. And he is a somewhat marginal character. Yes, he has some social status. Yes, he is foreign educated to a degree. But he is also someone who doesn't exactly fit in. He often has difficulty with making attachments. A lot of the relationships tend to fray. And I think we can understand genres and modes like the picaresque through the concept of the motif. And the key thing with a motif, which can be a character, it can be a behavior, it can be a line of dialogue, it can be a theme, it can be many, many different things. But the key thing is that it is something that is repeated. It comes back again and again. And its meaning may change with each repetition. It doesn't mean the same thing at first appearance as it does at 14th appearance. And this means that its symbolism can also change. Within the Picaresque mode, motifs of the genre include travel, so someone who leaves home if they have a home to begin with, people who have rather dubious or questionable moral character. They have encounters, as I mentioned. They may have peril, but also light moments and relief. Journeys can put a lot of stress on individuals and can test their moral fiber, you could say. And whether they succeed or fail, the result can often be to raise questions about just how stable social conventions are. Let's take just one other canonical North American example, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, in which we have this character who's kind of a young rapscallion. He's homeless, his father is the local drunk, so he's pretty much raised himself. And he lives very much on the margins. He doesn't really live in town. He has no roof over his head. He spends a lot of time on a raft on the great Mississippi River. He occasionally goes into town. He smokes, he drinks, he does whatever he wants. So he's something of a symbol of freedom. He is not constrained by the social mores of society. And he mentions in one of his last utterances that he doesn't want to go back into those confines represented by Aunt Sally, that she's going to try to civilize him. So he ends up lighting out for the territory and going to that unspecified place where he can be free. You can think of plenty of Chinese examples too. One of the most obvious would be the Journey to the West, in which this is a spiritual journey. It's a quest. We're trying to obtain something. So in this case, it's very purpose-driven. And we have humans, and we have beasts, and we have supernatural characters, and encounters with monsters and demons. A lot of fantastic things go on. Then you have other itinerant types who are constantly on the road. Their very being and existence and identity is tied to being a street performer or someone else who is on a journey. To give just one more example about Fang Hongjian, his very name it actually suggests upward social mobility and success in becoming a high official and gaining wealth and rank, and that he is gradually going to work his way up. But that is not his actual trajectory in the novel, and so it's a very ironic type of name. So what is the purpose of having this extended journey sequence? What is Qian Zhongshu doing? Is he trying to reveal particular things about his characters? And how do they experience the journey? Is it a trial for them? Is it a joy and a pleasure and a relief? Well, you have a lot of representations of these very intellectual, bookish, urban types going on the road and experiencing misadventure because they don't really know how to be or how to exist in this different culture. So there's some culture clash. However, you also have characters like Li Meiting, who goes into the countryside very well prepared. He doesn't just have his lectures written, he also has a bunch of medicine so that he can sell it because he knows that in wartime, commodities are worth a lot. So the journey reveals some things about characters, but it also does other things as well. It brings these characters into close proximity with each other, so you have a lot of these personality clashes and discoveries. They room together, they try to battle mosquitoes together, they overhear things, they commiserate, they experience hunger together. And so for Fang and Sun, of course, this is kind of their first look at each other when their guard is down or when they are reliant on each other to a certain degree. However, there's also the flip side that familiarity breeds contempt, and that the better you get to know someone, the less you like them. They also come into contact with this array of other figures who are not intellectuals, who are military leaders or widows or prostitutes, bus drivers, all of these people that they have interactions with and negotiate with. So you could call this something of a humanistic and sociological survey of China that Qian is able to accomplish by taking his characters out of their comfort zone. In his preface to this novel, Qian Zhongshu makes this ironic remark where he's essentially admitting that he doesn't treat his characters very well, but as kind of an apologia. He's saying, I haven't forgotten that they are still human. They are possessed of the basic nature of hairless bipeds. Hairless biped is a bit of a joke. It refers to the philosopher Socrates, who supposedly used that term to define humans in the most objective way possible. But then someone brought a plucked chicken to Socrates and said, so is this a human too? So Qian Zhongshu published a story collection the same year that he began serializing Fortress Besieged, called Human, Beast, and Ghost. This translation is called Humans, Beasts, and Ghosts because it also includes Written in the Margins of Life, Qian Zhongshu's 1941 story collection. And you can see that there's a typology in the title here, that his subjects are humans, beasts, and ghosts. So are these three different types, or are people moving from being humans to being beasts to being ghosts? Is this a devolution? So if you look at passages within this chapter of the journey, you certainly get humans. For example, when Xinmei and Hongjian see this peanut vendor, and it turns out they're from the same province, and so they strike up a conversation. This is a man who has accepted his lot. He's definitely human, and so this is kind of the human face of the war. But then at the opening of chapter 5, you also have this human who is at a border between the French concession and the so-called Chinese city, this Frenchman who Fang Hongjian met on the boat and who is now a policeman guarding this border. And so this is how we start the chapter, with the human kind of turning into a beast. We also have many, many instances where the body is besieged, right? Fang Hongjian throws up in Shanghai. There's all this disgusting food they encounter on the road. They make jokes about cannibalism. And I would mention that if you look at Qian Zhongshu's biography, he had his own minor travel misadventures. For example, when he arrived at Oxford, supposedly, according to the sub-rector at his college, he fell off a bus and broke his teeth, and later joked about it as being his first embrace of Oxford soil. But Qian Zhongshu takes us to this place where there might be ghosts, or at least there is certainly talk about ghosts. And the characters discover that the place that they have visited may be haunted. And there's this very unsettling, uncanny moment at the end where Fang Hongjian is kind of wondering about this destination. Is he going to hell? In the stories of Pu Songling, we have a lot of characters who wake up to discover that they're in a graveyard, or that the place that they're inhabiting is haunted. And characters who are also mortally afraid of Yegui, these wandering ghosts. These wandering ghosts who can turn you into a wandering ghost. So at the very end, Xinmei has this rather, to me, glib reference to what is the meaning of their journey, that they've gotten to know each other better. Fang Hongjian says, well, I hope you're not sick of me now. And he says, well, I'm not sick of you, but you're absolutely useless. And so is Xinmei right? Or are there more meanings to this journey? We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next video lecture.